welcome guys to none other than the BYD Seagull, the electric car that's set to revolutionize the Philippines' electric vehicle industry because of its affordable price point. But it's one thing for an EV to be affordable, for it to hit mainstream popularity, but it's another for it to be both affordable and really good. So the BYD Seagull, by the way, is the electric car that a lot of legacy automakers fear. And there's a perfectly good reason for that. Alam naman natin we're headed to this electrified future. But in order for that to be achieved, we need affordable but quality electric cars. Actually, if you're gonna be checking out news reports from Detroit, basically the home of Ford, General Motors, and even Chrysler, they were astonished with the fact that the BYD Seagull is a quality car but at a price point that only the American automakers can dream of. Just take a look at it. Ang sobrang porma niya, especially for its sub 1 million peso price point. You have full LED exterior lighting, two-tone alloy wheels, and even smartphone-based telematics through the BYD app. So now that we're here in the interior of the BYD Seagull, as you're gonna see here, the interior layout is very stylish. There's a soft padded layer here on this lower portion of the dash. So below the black hard plastic on top, there's this blue soft touch layer here which helps in uplifting the car's interior. Even the switches here, kanang silver cylindrical switches here below the touchscreen, they feel pretty nice, and this has been a signature, by the way, of a lot of BYD Ocean Series electric cars like the BYD Seal, the Sea Lion, and also the Atto 3. Also worth mentioning here is that you have here a floating center console that is also sort of a tray for your wireless charging para sa iyong phone. And then you also have here a charging pad na rin for your smart key. Apple CarPlay and Android Auto here, by the way, is wireless, so you don't need the wires, sa totoo lang. And yun nga, with the wireless charging pad, you're gonna be really able to use the smartphone-based features of the infotainment system ng basically walang wires. So speaking of the infotainment mismo, what you have here is BYD's signature rotating screen. So in this case, it's a 10.1-inch touchscreen, which of course, yun nga, as you're seeing ngayon, it can rotate. I don't know why that's gonna be useful, because either way, if you're gonna be using the smartphone mirroring features, it's gonna be defaulting anyway to landscape mode. Rotating screen aside though, the main infotainment is actually pretty good. It's very responsive, ang sobrang snappy ng interface niya. A bit on the childish side, I guess, or I guess a bit on the chintzy side yung itsura ng kanyang operating system. But yun nga, the response times are so snappy, they're pretty much like an iPad in terms of response times. So this is an infotainment system that's well done. And then right beside the infotainment system is you have your digital gauge cluster, or at least a dot matrix display for your speed and your power output. Then you have here a small multi-information display being sandwiched by those two dot matrix displays. And then other stuff worth highlighting in the interior of the BYD Seagull is that you have here the signature bucket seats that BYD has now been known for. And you know how Porsche charges you with putting the logos on the headrest? Here in the BYD, they're free. Lang, something worth mentioning anyway. But yeah, in terms of the other aspects, oh, this is actually pretty cool. Yung kanang lights here are touch capacitive. And yeah, this is basically a very nice interior. I think it's very premium, especially for the price. And then, since this is competing with, of course, the likes of the Toyota Wigo, the Honda Brio, but of course, being electric, there's a lot of advantages with this car in terms of packaging, because as you're gonna see it in the rear seats, there's actually quite a lot of space. So, as I mentioned, this is based on the E-Platform 3.0, and this is there for a bespoke EV platform as opposed to just adopting a gas-powered platform for electric car use. So, wala ka ditong transmission tunnel, and therefore, the floor here is very flat. And the batteries, basically the LFP lithium iron phosphate batteries, are sandwiched somewhere along the car's floor. Unlike the VinFast VF5, which I drove a couple of months ago, it doesn't suffer from having a high floor and a low seat. So okay, they're still on the lower side of things in terms of the seat mounting points, but hindi siya kasing lala nung sa VinFast VF5, and therefore, it's actually a pretty comfortable space to be in here in the back of the BYD Seagull. So yun nga, this seat by the way is in my driving position, and as you're gonna see here, there's a ton of legroom. That's a lot of legroom, and headroom is also pretty good, though not as generous as the car's legroom. But yun nga, it's very spacious here at the back. Based on the seat sculpting, yung sculpting ng upuan niya, ng mga backrests and all, it's actually really just meant for 2 people, and BYD doesn't want you to fit 3 adults here at the back of the BYD Seagull. And that's despite the fact that the BYD Seagull is one of the widest cars in its segment compared to the Wigo, the Brio. Yeah, in terms of amenities here at the back, yun nga lang, you have no aircon vents, you have no charging ports at the back, but then again, lahat ng mga competitors here at this price point, either way, like the Wigo nga or the Honda Brio, they don't even have rear seat amenities. The windows go all the way down. Oh, that's a one-touch down window, not one-touch up though. Pretty good na rin that it ends here, yung window niya. So, yeah, in terms of space, practicality, the back of the BYD Seagull is a nice place to be in. So, let's talk about the trunk space. So again, being a bespoke EV platform nga, there's a good amount of space at the back of the BYD Seagull. Yun nga lang, when you fold down the rear seats, they don't split 60-40. So it's the entire backrest that will fold down if you want to expand the cargo area. Yun nga lang, once that's folded, hindi flat yung kanyang cargo floor. So there's a bit of a ridge. But in terms of the numbers, here's the numbers of the BYD Seagull's trunk space. And yun nga, as mentioned, they're actually pretty good. So here's how the turn signals sound, by the way. It's a very interesting sound. It sounds like a doorbell, let's be honest, but yeah, it's a quirk that's worth highlighting, I think. Another quirk that I think is also worth highlighting is the fact that this car only has a single wiper blade. You know, kinda like those Ford GT, mga Lamborghini Revuelto, mga supercars. Wala lang. So yeah, this basically makes the BYD Seagull a supercar as well because it only has a single wiper up front. Kidding aside, the BYD Seagull, yun nga, despite here in this torrential rain that we're currently experiencing here in Evo City, sa Cavite, an Ayala development area, of course, as I've always mentioned sa mga reviews ko, with especially economy cars, like cheap cars, automakers are always, of course, in the pursuit of making their cars quieter, more refined, and basically feeling more expensive than they actually are. But let's be honest, even if the Toyota Wigo, for instance, has become a much more refined, much more rigid, and much more premium car in terms of the car's structural rigidity and yung mga vibrations and all, the Toyota Wigo still pretty much feels like a budget car. And by ditching the gas engine, you basically eliminated your primary vibration source, which is, of course, that gasoline engine. And therefore, from that part alone pa lang, by having no gas engine, the BYD Seagull is a much more refined car, significantly more refined pa nga, than something like a Toyota Wigo. So the Toyota Wigo and the Honda Brio are basically the cars that this is trying to compete with. And din nga, by going electric and having those batteries packed under the car's chassis, or actually inherently part of the car structure, the resulting vehicle is one that doesn't have a lot of vibrations. And actually, if you're gonna go through bumps like ito ngayon, ang sobrang rock solid ng structure niya. And the reason why I always mention chassis rigidity sa mga reviews ko is because if the car structure is inherently very rock solid, very rigid, the car doesn't feel lata. Hindi parang lata yung pakiramdam niya. So I always tout German cars, pansin nyo sa mga reviews ko. I always tout German cars for being extremely rigid and very stable. And though this isn't a German car in terms of the rigidity and stability aspect, but compared to the Wigo, for example, or even the Vios, kasi kapresyo na rin niya ang Toyota Vios being electric, I'd rather take this car on a long drive if I were being honest. This car's much more cohesive, much more refined, and practically night and day different in terms of the refinement levels of the BYD Seagull. Sa totoo lang nga, we're currently in a torrential rain ngayon, and usually with cars like the Toyota Wigo and Vios nga, dude, you're gonna hear the rain badly sa kanang roof panel, especially with the Vios and Wigo, because they don't really have a lot of sound insulation and even a lot of heat insulation. Kaya nga, if you're gonna be a Grab passenger in a Vios, talagang tagos yung init sa kanyang bubong. But yun nga, here in the Seagull, I mean, I haven't driven this car based on this weather. I haven't driven this car sa tirik yung araw, but based on what I am not hearing as much compared to their usual Japanese economy car, this seems to be better insulated from the outside world. So, of course, also being electric, you don't have a thrummy 3-cylinder gas engine to deal with. And yung as mentioned nga, going electric pretty much makes cars like these, itong mga economy cars natin, a lot more refined, a lot more premium yung kanyang driving experience. Because let's be honest, no one ever said the Mitsubishi Mirage's 3-cylinder sounded good. So by taking that away and replacing it with an electric motor, the car becomes infinitely and miles better in terms of the refinement and of course the power delivery, because being electric, yun nga, there's wheel spin, being rainy nga lang yung weather, but by going electric, the BYD Seagull is much faster to accelerate, much more responsive since of course instant torque and all, a lot more quiet, a lot more refined, a lot more rigid yung kanyang chassis, much more rock solid because of course you have those batteries helping the chassis rigidity of the car. And now that we're on the topic of responsive acceleration, how does the BYD Seagull feel like in terms of the handling aspect? Actually, surprisingly, in terms of the steering feel, usually kasi with Chinese cars, I tend to hate their steering wheels except for, I guess, the JAC MPOW. But here in the BYD Seagull, because what I hate usually with Chinese car steerings is that there's a lot of play on center. So, not only does it feel eerily light, but it also feels pretty much dead in terms of on-center feel. So yeah, actually in the BYD Seagull, it's pretty much the same case pa rin. It's not a steering that's gonna be wowing you in terms of road feel, in terms of how connected you feel to the car. But it's much better than what I'm usually accustomed to with Chinese car steerings because there's not a lot of play on the wheel. As in, like, it's really a rigid connection to the front wheels. There's actually a degree of precision. That's what I like. There's a degree of precision with the steering wheel. It's not completely isolated from what's happening to the front wheels. So it's actually a pleasant car to hustle to the corners. Yun nga lang, this is a tall-ish car. And yes, though the batteries are helping the car lower its center of gravity because it's hugging the ground whenever hustling this car through a corner. Yeah, this is actually, from a handling perspective, it's actually pretty nice. It's very nimble. That's my description. It's more of a nimble car. There's a degree of athleticism, but I wouldn't call it outright fun. I guess fun's again a subjective matter naman, aside from steering feel and body control, because there's a bit of body roll with this car, no? But yun nga, if you're gonna be hustling this car through the corners, ito nga, there's agility because of the car's diminutive size. The brakes are also pretty good in the BYD Seagull. It's actually very firm, very reassuring, and easy to modulate in the importanteng part because with electrified vehicles, yung first percentage ng apak mo is, of course, the regenerative braking. But even that transition from regen to the actual disc brakes is actually pretty good. Yung nga lang may feedback though is that a lot of electric cars these days have one pedal driving sa lang regenerative braking. But even here in the BYD Seagull nga lang, the regen braking or the strongest setting for the regen braking is not enough for one pedal driving in the city. So in terms of the regen aspect for that mode, hindi siya kasing strong with other electric cars. But then again, the BYD Seagull is inherently an efficient electric car based on its range. Finally, in terms of range, this is a BYD, so you pretty much expect it to have good range because of course this is the company that's built around the electric drivetrain or yung kanilang identity. And so by making a name for themselves in the battery technology and of course their electric motors, the BYD Seagull can do up to 300 kilometers based on the NEDC cycle. So that's a lot of range for such a small city electric car. And let's be honest, in terms of that range, if you've driven a Vios or a Wigo, hindi na naman ganun kalayo ang range yung mga kotseng yon. Because the Toyota Vios, for example, I've only been able to do like mga 350, 300 kilometers on a full tank. The full tank of the Vios in the first place is not even that big. So, yeah, no reason for you to say range anxiety with the BYD Seagull. Perhaps, I guess, if you're gonna go out of town, for example, but again, with 300 kilometers of range, Baguio is less than that, Subic is less than that, and you have charging stations on the way to Baguio and at Subic rin naman. And they're, by the way, both DC fast chargers. So if you guessed that the BYD Seagull will cost under 1 million pesos, well, you're absolutely right. Pero to be specific, the BYD Seagull will be sold at an introductory price of just 898,000 pesos. Basically putting it nearly on par with the gas-powered Honda Brio RS. So, low price, good quality, as well as being backed by one of the Philippines' largest conglomerates, well, it's safe to say that the BYD Seagull is indeed ready to start an electric revolution.